Hello, I'm gonna talk to you about the evolution of the phone. First, in the history, the telegraph was invented in 1834. It was invented by Carl F. Goff and Ernest H. Weaver. They built the electromagnetic telegraph. The telegraph was the first step to making electrical signals travel from one place or one device to another. Years later, in 1844, Samuel Morse demonstrated the Baltimore M.D. and the Washington, D.C. telegraph line. He was Samuel Morse. In 1860, the Reed phone was invented by Philip Reis. That phone was the first instrument to transmit the spoken word. And here is the telephone. In 1864, James C. Monroe predicts electromagnetic radiation. Some years later, in 1866, the transatlantic cable was installed. It was the second because the first failed, and as we can see here, telephone communication was available between the two countries. In 1874, Alexander Graham Bell discovered the principle of the telephone, and he patented years later. As we can see here, the telephone patent was issued in March 3rd for the improvements in telegraphy. Elisha Gray applies for a similar patent hours after Bell. Gray and Bell will fight for years in court as to whose telephone was legal. Here's Graham Bell. In 1877, the electromotograph was invented by Thomas Edison, who received a patent in Britain for the electromograph. His carbon-based transmitter is still used in the telephones today. It was the first permanent outdoor telephone wire-strung. The commercial telephone service begins in the United States years later. In 1878, the World Cable Exchange comes online. The World Cable Exchange comes online. It enables calls to be switched among any number of subscribers rather than requiring directing lines. In 1879, the telephone subscribers changed. It began to change because it was designed by numbers rather than names. This allows more subscribers per switching station in that year. In the year of 1880, the long-distance service was established and grew using metallic circuits. In 1883, the electronic tube was discovered by Thomas A. Edison. He said that electrons in vacuum flow, and it called that the Edison effect, and it was the foundation of the electronic tube. In the year 1888, the common battery system developed by Hammond B. Hayes permits a central battery to supply all telephones on an exchange. In 1891, the first automatic dial system was patented by a Kansas City underwriter. Switchboard operators were no longer necessary to make a telephone call. In 1894, the beginnings of the cell phone technology started. Oliver Lodge demonstrates wireless communication over a distance of 150 yards. This is the beginnings of the cell phone technology. He is Oliver Lodge. Years later, in 1900, The first cone telephone was installed in Hartford, Connecticut. In 1906, Doctor Lee De Forest began to work on applying what was known as an audion, a three-element vacuum tube, which could amplify radio waves to telephony. In 1911, American Telephone and Telegraph (AT&T) took control of the Western Union Telegraph Company. This is the beginning of Mabel, which would be the largest telephone company in the USA until 1980s. On the year of 1918, the Super Teleroutine receiver circuit was invented by Edwin H. Armstrong. In 1921, automatic switching of large numbers of calls was made possible using phantom circuits, which allowed three telephone conversations to be conducted on two pairs of wires. More people could use the same circuit, so telephone companies did not have to build more switching stations. In 1927, the French phone with the transmitter and receiver in the single handset developed by the Bell system was released on a widespread basis. That made the telephone signal less distorted. The teletypewriter in 1931 was installed. This machine sends printed type like a typewriter across the telephone lines to be printed out on the other end. This is the beginnings of the facsimile machines and also led the use of the telephone. The first commercial mobile telephone service put into service in 1946, linking moving vehicles to the telephone network by radio, like this. In the year of 1950, microwave telephone and communication links are further developed. On the same year, in 1950, time division multiplexing is applied to the telephony. People were now charged by the minute for their telephone calls. All number calling (ANC) instituted to handle consumer demands for individual telephone numbers, and then the personal telephone number was invented in 1958. The Videophones were invented in 1960, and it became more affordable and practical. People could now see who they were talking to. Telstar, the world's first international communications satellite, was rocket into the orbit on July 10 with a collaboration between NASA and the Bell system. The telephone calls could now be bounced off a satellite to switching station in 1962. 2 years later, Bell Systems introduced the touch-tone phone. This telephone made a different beep for each number, instead of counted clicks for each number. Here is the touch-tone telephone. In 1965, the first commercial communications satellite, the Early Bird, was placed into service. Motorola in 1972 demonstrated the cell phone cellular to the FCC. People could call each other without wires, and that was the first cellular telephone in the history. In 1980s, Bell System FT3 fiber optic communication was developed. In the year of 1985, the fax machines became popular. In the year of 1989, the pocket cellular telephone was introduced by Motorola. And soon up, in 1990s, the digital signal was a procession of telecommunication equipment, including ISDN-C and HDTV. A television can now be used as a television, telephone, computer, and video game center all in one place. Years later, our day, the telephone is still developing all the technological resources, and we have now a very efficient phone. Thank you.